There we go. We got sound. Put your dreams away for now. I won't see for some time. I'm lost in my mind. I get lost in my mind. Mama once told me, you're already home when you feel loved. I am lost in my mind. I get lost in my mind. Ooh. We'll try that again, right? Ooh. Take it down a little bit, that's fine. Oh, my brother, your wisdom is older than me. Oh, my brother, don't you worry about me. Don't you worry, don't you worry, don't worry about me. How's that bricklaying coming? How's your engine running? Is that bridge getting built? Are your hands getting filled? Won't you tell me, my brother? 'Cause there are stars up above. We can start moving forward. Ooh. Whoa. How's that bricklaying coming? How's your engine running? Is that bridge getting built? Are your hands getting filled? Won't you tell me, my brother? 'Cause there are stars up above. We can start moving forward. Lost in my mind, I'm lost in my mind. I get 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 lost in my mind.
Good morning, UUCL. I said, good morning, UUCL. Good morning. All right. I like it. I like it. I'm nervous, so I'm going to need you guys to be with me today. Okay. I have a whole bunch of stuff written down, and my mind is just so busy. I don't even know if I can focus on it all, but I am going to try. Heather said, breathe. I got a lot of really good advice about this service as I was coming up here freaking out. But I'm going to try and... So welcome makers, builders, designers, artists, guides, teachers, poets, and creators of all kinds. This service is inspired by you. Over the years that I've been coming to UCL, about 8 years and 3 years as a member, I am constantly surprised by the things that you guys do. Everything from gardening to engineering to teaching to nurturing souls in every manner of speaking. And last year as we were winding up and I found out we had yet another doctor amongst us, I was like, wow, that regular guy that I've been teasing and fooling around with is, inside people's bodies? Wow. It's just really kind of weirded me out, but it was wonderful. And I thought to myself, we need to share that. We need to share it with each other. We need to be able to express our creativity, and we need to be able to talk about the things that we're passionate about. And I couldn't think of anything that was more spiritual than that. And so I started talking to individuals and asking them to be supportive and to maybe share some of their gifts with us. So over the next coming year, we're going to have classes that are free and open to the community, as well as our congregation on knitting and crocheting. We're going to have all kinds of sewing and hopefully woodworking. We're going to have altar making, you name it. We're going to try and get it done. And if you have a talent that you want to share, please come share it with us. Whatever it is, we're going to make a way to have a weekend where we explore that thing together. Today's service would not be possible if it were not for the wonderful people who helped me make it come together. Georgine and Phil, who will be lending us their musical talents. Of course, Eli. We have our acting religious education director, Elizabeth Gawron, who has been monumental, I can't tell you, in helping me pull it together. We have Ivyanna, who is a somewhat new visitor and friend of our church, and she has agreed to be our worship associate very bravely. And we also have Kim Chappelle, who is going to be guiding us. Did I leave anybody out? We have our guest speaker today, Janet Starner, and I'm going to let her leave that there. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything because I went very off script. I think that is it for now. I will invite Kim Chappelle up to do our land acknowledgement. Thank you all so much for being here. Stay with us. Oh, one more thing, I'm so sorry. This is a process art piece, this whole service. So we're gonna make mistakes, there's gonna be some things out of order. Go with the flow. I promise you'll feel better at the end because of it. All right, thank you, Kim.
Let us take a moment to consider the sacred space that we're in now and acknowledge the truth of the land beneath and around us. We are gathered on land once inhabited by people known as the Susquehannock and the Conestoga. We acknowledge the violent legacies of genocide, displacement, and settlement that led to our being here today, and remind ourselves to live humbly in relationship to the land and with all the indigenous peoples still living and loving on this continent. May we also acknowledge that the wealth and foundation of the United States was also built upon the labor and the toil of enslaved peoples. Many indigenous peoples will say, all are relatives. May we live into this truth and aspiration together.
Okay, it's time for our chalice lighting. These are words by Michael Sider. In this house of gathering, we say yes to the call to be fully and gloriously human as we honor the divine spark within each of us. In this house, we say yes to the call we have heard that binds us together into a community of care, concern, and celebration. We say yes to the call that knits us together as a whole people. We say yes to the call that reminds us of our ties. To this interconnected web of all existence, we do not enter houses of gathering empty-handed. We bring our longings, our memories, and we call upon the spirit of love, freedom, and compassion to abide within us. Now we will have some words from our maker and worship associate, Ivyanna Colon Greider.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Cindy, for inviting me to speak today. This is just a little something I wrote about the importance of making to me. Making is love for yourself and for others. When we make, we put our entire heart and soul into it. We become a part of our work, and it becomes a part of us. We open our hearts, our minds, up to share with others. Through making, our love endures, perhaps changing hands over time, but always providing that warm embrace and comfort that handmade items seem to stir within us. Making is feeling and coping. A year ago this week, my cat Boots was hospitalized for 7 days, and this was a difficult time for me because my cat is my best friend. She's like my daughter. She's been there through some of the most difficult times in my life. The times where it's hard for me to get up out of bed or find the courage to keep going. She's been my motivation through all of that. And she was hospitalized and diagnosed with feline diabetes. Her condition quickly worsened. She stopped eating, developed ketoacidosis. I was just devastated, and I just felt guilty I couldn't see the signs before. And I was also just terrified that she wouldn't make it, and I visited her every chance I could. All I could do was just cry as I struggled to see her, struggle to be in an unknown place with unfamiliar people. And so one day I just decided to go back to crochet to distract my mind from all the worry I was feeling. And I started crocheting a little cat. I brought her here with me. She looks like my cat. And it's very simple, but it's one of the most meaningful pieces I've ever made. And thankfully, my Boots is still here with me today. We battle through her diagnosis every day, but this little crocheted cat with her little scarf is a reminder to me to just remember how grateful I am for every day that I have with her, and just to remember our resiliency. And then finally, making is growth and overcoming. In addition to being an act of love and a way to cope with our feelings, making helps us work out our lives. While crocheting, we can always start again. It doesn't matter how far we've gone or how many mistakes we've made. We can always unravel our work, untangle the mess, learn from our actions, and create a better version or make something completely different than what we had originally planned. Like life, there are times where we feel so far gone or too late to change, but it's never too late to start over and create the life we desire. Life's challenging, and mistakes are a normal part of that. These opportunities are for learning and growth. And with the right tools, we can stitch a new and improved path. I love crochet because it gives us the flexibility and freedom to shape our life's work. And although we can't determine where we'll go, we can always unravel a bit and stitch a new path for ourselves. Thank you so much for letting me read that, and thank you for everyone for providing a safe space for me to do that. But I'll pass it to Elizabeth to talk about our Maker's Moment.
Hello. So today we are having a Maker's Moment, and this came out of our planning of spirituality of making. So if you have an order of service and you open it up, there should be a blank sheet that says Maker's Moment. If you don't have one, we have people on the side that will make sure you get a piece of paper. There are also pencils at the ends of your pews here, so pass those down. They're at the aisle side, the center aisle. So grab your materials, Use a hymnal as a hard surface. It's okay. So as you're getting settled in, I just want to say thank you to Sindy for planning this whole service. When I first started here as the interim, this was one of the things that was like put on my radar, and I just said, this is my place, a spirituality of making service. I mean, that's my life. So this has just been such a joy and pleasure through the whole summer to be working with Eli and to be working with Sindy and all of the other wonderful people here to create this experience. And that's what this is today. It's an experience for us all. So, to start the Maker's Moment, I am going to talk you through a drawing. You're going to do 2 drawings today, so leave room on your paper. And I'm just going to read an instruction, and you just do what you feel that instruction is telling you to do, okay? Okay, everybody have a pencil? You've got your papers, it looks like it, awesome. Okay. Step 1, draw a wavy line. Step 2, draw a curved line underneath. Step 3, draw a line down the middle. Step 4, draw a line at the bottom. Step 5, draw a wavy line up at the top. Step 6, draw another wavy line up at the top. Draw a circle, and draw another circle. All right, now what I want you to do is, if you're not close to somebody, show each other your drawings. Show people your drawings. See how that turned out. If you need to get up, show each other what you drew. Okay. We're going to do drawing number 2, but I'm not going to be talking to you, and I'm not going to be standing here. So, now, get your piece of paper ready for drawing number 2, and you're going to watch me and follow along, okay? Now show each other your drawings. Raise your hand if it kind of looks a lot more like the person next to you. And I heard whisperings, it's a chalice, it's a chalice. So who drew a chalice the first time? Because, top, no. You're like, no. So this is just a highlight of my making and what I do. So for the rest of the service, I'm actually going to be over here. I'll be painting, enjoy watching, and afterwards, I'll have that downstairs. But this is something that I do. I call it live painting, and I do this during worship services and vigils, and it's a way for us to experience more of our senses during worship. Because sometimes when we just hear through talking, it doesn't quite translate, and we might not all get that same message. But when you have all of your senses engaged, you have hearing, you have visuals, you have all of that mind, body, soul connection happening, that's when we start to, as a community, start to get this beautiful message and get to kind of share that with one another. So that was just a highlight of why there's an easel up here today. So thank you for humoring me. I love doing that activity. It is so fun. What's next, Cindy? Eli. And now Eli is going to share his maker's moment with you.
Hello, friends. I'm moving out of my box that is there, and I'm here today. This one, how do you follow Elizabeth's thing? This one's not quite as fun, per se. But Cindy had asked me to do something for spirituality making. I said, okay, I'll do some music, whatever. That is what I do. But then she said, which was the hard part, was do music for Eli, right? And the tricky part about that is my job is come in here, encourage, facilitate music making within the community, sing together, all that jazz, all the good stuff. And then I had to take a minute and think about it and figure out what is the spirituality that is involved with music, right? For me, I don't really have an attachment to religion per se, right? I've always kind of floated agnostic or otherwise, right? So for me, music was never inspired by, I've sung at churches all my life, right? But it's always been a little more complicated than that, right? So I think everyone knows Hallelujah, right? Leonard Cohen, right? But there's a little bit of complex truth behind it, and I chose it specifically because, one, it was the first song that I took to learning on the guitar. It's the reason I finger pick. It's the reason I don't really play with a pick, right? And a bigger reason for it was that it wasn't picked to be a performance thing. It was not even picked to be an educational learning thing immediately. It was more, I just kind of want to do it, right? And how do you explain the I just want to do it feeling, right? So it's not as tangible maybe as art, right? Well, music is art, but, physical art, right? But, it's a lot of auditorial sort of stuff, right? So I want to try to get into the headspace of where I was at sophomore year, and no idea that I would even be using a guitar as a medium to help promote, spiritual growth or anything of that nature, right? Here I am on my kitchen floor in a very messy household, single parent situation, one of 5, middle child, right? Complex truths all around, which is fine. You learn to live with it, right? So, I could talk on and on. I'm a little long-winded. But I figured, I don't know, sing a verse or two of Hallelujah. For no other purpose than to sing and be together, right? So if I mess up the words, I mess up the words. If you know the words better than me, you can sing along. That's fine. But don't feel like you need to sing along. You can draw. Use your maker's space. Well, I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight overthrew you. Well, she tied you to the kitchen chair, she broke your throat and she cut your hair, and from your lips she drew the hallelujah. I'm sorry. Hallelujah. 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 Thanks, friends.
Thank you, Eli. I think every time Eli's band plays, the 20s band, every time they play, I always need him to sing I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor, but I think I have a new favorite now. I think this is my new must-have. Also, I want to say, I forgot to say earlier, hello to our people on Zoom. Everybody wave to our little camera in the back, onto our folks on Zoom. We did not forget you, we love you, and we are so glad you're here with us today. We're getting ready to do our joys, sorrows, and complex truths. People on Zoom, please feel free to type them into the chat box. For people here, if you don't know the procedure, there are plenty of people who are here who do know it. You'll get up, you'll get a stone, and you'll place it in the sand where you'll express your joys, your sorrows, your complex truth in a meditative musical, while we have meditative music playing in the background. So, okay. Okay. There is no pure joy, there is no pure sadness. There is only the juxtaposition of each in relation to one another. May you hold your sadness in contrast to joy. May you hold your joy as a beacon in the dark. May the complexity of life drive your passions and temper your rashness. May you find balance in between. May it be so. The two things that made me become a member of this church, well, not become a member, but made me enchanted with the church was our incredible mobile. I just thought it was, I've never been to a place where they put all of the world, as many as they could fit artistically, onto one little art piece, and to know that that was the center of this building, and that was the thing that was important, just really drew me in. The other things was the ceremony of joys, sorrows, and at the time it was just joys and sorrows, but it's become complex truths, and I love it all the more for that. Okay, so if there were ever proof of the interconnected web at work, it was my meeting of Janet Starner. I was at my gym, and we were in a group fitness class, and we always introduce ourselves, and I never pay attention, I really don't. But I have ADHD, so what happens is small sounds, little things just fully pulling my attention. And she had this little string, and I'm looking at it, but I didn't want to interrupt anybody, and she noticed it, and she says, oh, this string, and threw it away, and it just clinged right back onto her body. And she says, I can't get rid of this string. And we started talking and chatting, and that led into one of the easier classes because we were so in conversation off and on, and I was just so piqued by the fact that she was telling me about how she had just recently moved into the area and that she is a quilter. And I had tried to make a quilt once, and I was like, oh, wow, like somebody who actually does the thing. And I was at the same time planning this service and wondering what I was going to do. And the more she talked, the more I knew that I wanted her to be the person who was with us today. Yeah, so while we were talking, towards the end, I started mentioning you guys. I was like, wow, when I was trying to smooth her over to our to come in and join us, I was just like, oh, the people are great. I can't tell you how talented they are. And I'm talking about the artists, like my friend Linda in the back. You thought you would get away. And my friend who's a drummer, and all the great musicians, and you've heard the vocal talent. I just started telling her all about that. And I said, and every time I come back to the church, I find another doctor, like I said earlier. And she says, well, Dr. Janet Starner, nice to meet you. And I was like, oh, well, you definitely belong. So at any rate, without any further ado, Janet Starner, quilter, person extraordinaire.
Vertically challenged, Janet Starner. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. I'm delighted to be here. The truth is, asking a quilter if she would like to chat about quilt making is a little like walking into a library and asking a librarian if she knows of any good books. Also, the first time I entered the office here to talk with Cindy, and I saw the fiber art piece hanging on the wall, I was deeply impressed by the design, the colors, the materials, and the execution of that piece. And if it's any indication, this congregation has no shortage of very talented people, so it's pretty exciting to be able to say, yes, I'll help with whatever it is you all might decide to make for your new church quilt, if you decide to do that. So my topic this morning, and I feel kind of honored to be asked to kick this off, is the spirituality of quilting. At least that was the assignment Cindy gave me, but I wrestled with the concept for weeks and weeks. I tore up draft after draft, and as the deadline approached, I thought, well, holy cow, I'm no closer to figuring out what this is than I was when I started. Of course, the terms spirituality and quilting both are pretty slippery. They get used differently depending upon who it is that is using them and the context. So what one means to you may not mean the same thing to me. And at some point it occurred to me that whatever it is about quilting that's so compelling to me, expressing it in purely objective terms, using definitions or historical review or philosophical argument is just the wrong way to go about it. All I really can do, I realized, is tell you how it makes me feel to quilt and what it's like to make quilts in communion with others and how it's transformed my life. I'll let you decide on the spiritual part of it. I first learned to sew in a junior high home ec class, and I had my mother's garment making example as both model and encouragement for perfecting that skill. I once witnessed her make an entire dress in 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon because she didn't have anything to wear to church the next day. But my mom didn't make quilts. I first learned the basics of piecing and hand quilting in a class held at a small quilt shop in Western PA in the middle 1970s. I didn't particularly love the project, but I enjoyed hand quilting, and I had my hands full raising small children at that point, so I put it in a drawer, and there it has stayed. A few years later, we moved from Western Pennsylvania to Berks County, where we rented a farmhouse for a while. And while we were living there, we joined Trinity Lutheran Church in Kutztown. When I discovered that every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, a group of women met at the church to hand quilt the tops that others had brought to them, and that they were looking for help, I decided maybe it's time for me to start quilting again. I've always liked making things with my hands, and I was itching for a new outlet to satisfy that itch. The Trinity quilters sat around a large square frame that accommodated anywhere from 6 to 8 women at a time, taking up most of the floor space in a room the church called the parlor. At the end of each Thursday session, they stood the quilt frame up against the wall to make room for the adult Sunday school class that met there before the weekly service. So everyone passing by that open door could see the progress made on the current quilt, and many dropped in just to look at each beautiful project. They charged quilters by the number of spools of thread they used, and since there were so many of them, they could complete a quilt in just a few weeks. There was one male member of the group, and Harvey's only job was to thread needles and toss them across the quilt space to whoever needed one next. And I urge you to try sometime to throw a needle loaded with thread 6 feet and accurately place it in front of the person who needs it. It's not easy. These experienced needle workers did spectacularly good work. So on the first day I joined them, I was pretty nervous and intimidated, and I thought they might just say, well, thanks, but come back when you can do this a little better. But of course, they did not. They did quite the opposite. They were lovely women, most of them retired, and there was lots of conversations at these sessions about whose grandchildren were doing what, who was ill and needed help, and which projects they would do next. I needn't have worried about being rejected. They were gentle and kind teachers, giving me tips about how to properly knot the thread, where to first insert it into the work, and how to work with them at the frame. And they patiently answered each and every one of my newbie questions. When I was ready to make my own first quilt, I was too afraid to piece a top. So I decided to quilt what is called a whole cloth quilt. That is an entire piece of fabric of all one color that achieves its design entirely from the quilting. So I went to Sears Roebuck, bought the highest thread count cotton sheets and thickest batting I could find, and then I went to the group to ask for advice. They gave me a cardboard box full of the stencils they used to mark all of their quilts and said, here you go, keep them as long as you need to. They were very casual about the whole process, as if designing a quilt and completing it were as easy as falling off a bike. No problem, they said. You can do it, they said. They were warm in their encouragement, generous in their advice, and eager, they said, to see my completed project. And so it began. I sandwiched the top and the middle and the backing together, and then I began to hand quilt my project in an 18-inch hoop because I didn't have a quilt frame. Any experienced quilter who's listening to this by now will be thinking, she did what? Because it's hard to imagine, now I know, how I could possibly have made it more difficult for myself. But what I learned and came to appreciate deeply was the soothing rhythm and satisfaction of hand quilting line after line after line, watching the designs emerge as I progressed. That quilt still covers our bed, and it's a historical record of my progress as a hand quilter. And if you stick around after the service today, it's downstairs and you can see the very thing itself. When I look at that quilt, I can still see and hear those talented, generous, lovely women, my first quilt mothers, if you will. We could not have been more different in our backgrounds or in the ways we filled our days. But we connected over the quilting frame, and every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, I found myself surrounded by love, encouragement, and acceptance. And that life continued for a couple of years until my time was claimed by other pursuits. But my skills had improved enough that in 1995, the group's leader, Betty Kelchner, was asked to make a quilt for President Clinton to commemorate his visit to Kutztown earlier in the year. She invited me to make one of the blocks to include in the design, and they finished the quilt fairly quickly. It's really true. Many hands make light work. A few months later, the whole group traveled to Washington, D.C. by bus to the White House to present it to Mrs. Clinton, who was standing in for her husband that day. We waited for a long time in the diplomatic reception room with its famous panoramic wallpaper. We were really nervous. We were in awe of our surroundings and very excited at the chance to meet the First Lady. When she did finally arrive with her secretary in tow, who was constantly checking her watch, Mrs. Clinton shook each of our hands as we stood in a receiving line. It was a very formal moment, and her demeanor reflected that, until she got to Ruthie Foster. Ruthie was a salt-of-the-earth, normally unflappable woman with an easy laugh and a friendly smile. When Mrs. Clinton reached for her hand, Ruthie said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to meet you, but I'm so nervous. I think I might wet my pants right here." And in that one transformative instant, Hillary Clinton's social mask dropped. And she said, "Oh, no, I don't want you to be nervous at all. For heaven's sakes, this is your house. I want you to feel welcome and relaxed here. We're so glad you're here. Come sit down and tell me about this quilt." And in that moment, a real woman emerged, one who stayed long beyond the time she should have with us, and who chatted about needlepoint and her grandmother's quilting as if we'd been old friends. And that was the end of my quilting adventures for a long time, as I focused on raising my 4 daughters, being active in community affairs, attending graduate school, and building a career. But in February 2014, I found myself in a very dark place. My father was dying, and my workplace had become a place of fear and loathing rather than joy and contentment. One Saturday, I picked up a book in the clearance aisle at Barnes & Noble titled "Quilting for Peace" by Catherine Bell. And it was inside those covers I learned of the Quilts of Valor Foundation, and I determined then to find a local chapter of the group and join them. I figured that by helping others, I might, in turn, help myself. Quilts of Valor volunteers hail from all over the country and produce quilts that are awarded to service members or veterans who've been touched by war. The foundation's intent is to provide comfort and healing, and the message behind each quilt awarded is clear: thank you for your service, and your sacrifice in serving our nation. So I visited my local quilt shop and I asked if they had a QOV chapter. And the owner said brightly, "Well, no, we don't. Would you like to start one?" That wasn't exactly what I wanted to hear, but after the newsletter she published drew in half a dozen interested quilters, I agreed to lead the group. We awarded our first quilt to a 30-year-old veteran whose combat experiences had left him so damaged by PTSD that he lived at a halfway house for support. I gave a short speech in front of only 5 people because he wasn't emotionally up to a public ceremony. When it was over, and after we had wrapped the quilt around him, he began to sob, and then he hugged me tightly. Through his tears, he kept saying over and over, thank you so much. No one has ever said thank you to me for my service. This means so much to me." Now, that's what I'd call a spiritual experience. In that moment, I was absolutely certain that I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly the work that I was supposed to be doing right then. And as that gesture of love helped to heal that veteran, so in turn, the making of it helped restore a bit of me as well. Quilts of Valor Awards provide comfort, tactile as well as spiritual, on a national level. But our interactions are usually among strangers. We rarely personally know the service members who receive the quilts we award. But I've experienced what I call the spirituality of quilting in local contexts as well. My work on the quilts for veterans simultaneously connected me to a very small but very lively group of quilters who had formed a guild, met on a monthly basis, and who agreed to support my efforts with Quilts of Valor. So I quickly became an enthusiastic guild member. What I discovered once again in this group of extraordinary makers was acceptance, encouragement, support, and camaraderie. And that outpouring of appreciation, maker to maker, continued even when, I think, I strained their far more conservative taste toward traditional quilting patterns and colors. And even when I brought to our show and tell sessions the wackiest, most improvisational modern pieces, they always had something positive to say. Their generous encouragement was exactly what I needed to keep experimenting and learning. To me, these women are the literal embodiment of the spirituality of making: generous, giving, inclusive, and always ready to help. I miss them very much now that we've moved more than 80 miles away, and attending those meetings is problematic. If that all sounds as much like love as spirituality to you, I completely agree. I know for certain that when I make quilts for my grandchildren, I pack love into every design and fabric choice and every stitch as I quilt them up. I promised each of them a quilt when they graduate from high school. As I'm piecing and sewing and quilting, I'm weaving into that quilt all of my love and my hopes and my dreams for them, and I'm thinking of them as I work. As my husband draws the labels, I will sew into the binding. He incorporates images that evoke their gifts and their aspirations. When we present it to them and wrap it around their bodies, that quilt represents a link between them and us, a tangible token of our bond and our love. I hope that each of them will keep their quilts and use them until, like the Velveteen Rabbit, they are faded and worn or remade into something else altogether different. These threads connect us and remind them who they are and how well they are loved. The creative act of designing, piecing, and quilting often transports me into a wonderfully focused state that athletes might call flow and what some say they experience when they meditate. But there's also a connection in that act of creation to something larger, something powerful, something positive and life-giving. Sarah Vedler, an embroidery designer and quilter, recently wrote in an email that quilters often deprecate and minimize what they do as mere crafting. Vedling argues that in doing that we make a mistake. She writes, "You are healing and nourishing your own heart. You are spreading joy and love to others you share your designs with. In some cases, you're making an imprint on someone else's life that will last for years to come." I agree with her. It is all that and more. So if any of that sounds right to you, and if you would like to be part of the project that Sindy is organizing, or if you'd just like to see some of the maybe too many quilts that I brought along with me to share, I'll be staying after the service to chat over coffee, and as many of you may have guessed by now, I never get tired of talking about quilting. Thank you.
I get lost in my mind, lost in my mind. I get lost in my mind. I get lost.
If you were wondering what the project is that Janet is talking about, she has agreed to help us make a church quilt, a new church quilt to go alongside our previously made church quilt. And she's going to be downstairs. We have light refreshments downstairs, as well as Janet and some work from Elizabeth and some work from Ivyanna as well. So we will now invite Kim Chappelle up to facilitate our offertory. Thank you.
It's the time in our service when we ask you to support the work of this church with our offering. True to our policy, the plate offering is divided between the church and a local charity or organization. And even though I don't have the exact words in front of me, I do know that half the plate offering this week and this month goes to the LGBTQ plus organization. Thank you.
Now we invite Georgine, Eli, and Phil will be singing their rendition of Breathe.
Good morning, and thank you so much for this opportunity. This has been really wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to share very briefly about my own aha moment between spirituality and music. The connection between music and my spirituality became clear to me the summer of 1990 when I was staying with my mom and sister in Peachtree City, Georgia. I had been making my way back to my sister's house using the only route I knew, a 2-lane stretch of road that went on literally for miles. Being unfamiliar with the area, I had trouble finding a radio station I liked, so as I drove, I let my radio scan through what seemed like hundreds of possibilities. Once I heard a station with no static, I quickly hit the scan button, causing it to set. I had no idea what the type of music was or the radio station's content. Ignoring what I was hearing, I became lost in thought regarding the current changes in my personal life. All of a sudden, the lighting changed. I began to notice the sparkles of sunlight shining through the leaves on the trees. I became aware of the birch trees thickly lining each side of the road. Their branches like arms and their golden leaves like fingers stretched across the road towards one another to form a golden sunlit arch. I eased up on the gas to take this visual gift in. Then right on cue, something caught my ear. I turned the volume up on the radio to something I was unable to enjoy before, and that was classical music. The sparkles of sunlight and the gentle strings of Vivaldi's Summer blended perfectly within my soul. I felt at peace. I felt close to God. At that moment, I knew my spiritual path had taken a most beautiful, most precious turn. Currently, music is a staple for me during prayer, during meditation, and as I sleep. I've asked Eli to lead us in the meditation on breathing that you can all join in on.
For those who know the UU hymns, this is 1009, Meditation on Breathing, Sarah Dan Jones. We have Phil to help us out. There are actually 3 layered parts. Sing along to whatever you feel comfortable and what you learn in the moment. I promise it's not too hard to learn. Phil, can we have a seat? This is the easy part. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Yeah, keep going. Breathe in, breathe out.
When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in,
When I breathe in,
I breathe in peace. When I breathe out,
when I breathe out,
I breathe out love. When I breathe in,
when I breathe in,
I breathe in peace. When I breathe out,
when I breathe out,
I breathe out love. When I breathe in,
I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out.
Our closing words are something that I wrote back in 2015 while I was in college, and I've revised for this service. It's called Conscious Mind of an Artist. Everything inspires me, and I'm so full of ideas I can't keep them straight. Lately, I've been into making something beautiful and then destroying it, or hiding it under a mess of materials. This process has helped me relax because there's no mistakes, nothing is final. My work won't last forever. It may fall apart tomorrow. But you know, I've held on too long to things. I've been holding on, but not dealing. When I make, I feel like I'm working through a creative problem, rather than preserving a perfect image of the answer to that problem. Sometimes there's no easy answer, or even an answer at all. I'm not searching for answers. Rather, I'm enjoying the discoveries along the way. I have learned and relearned myself, I have loved and I've lost. I've lost myself and am unsure if I find myself again or discover another way to hide from myself. I'm happier than I've ever imagined and appreciate every second I am on this earth. There is nothing finite in this world, not even death, and I'm alive, and so I find ways to enjoy the time I have, and my art allows me to do that. My whole process allows me to deal with the craziness that goes on in my head, because this world may drive you crazy. Yet, that craziness, it makes me feel alive and free. Like I'm no longer weighing myself down just to drown in negativity and sadness. Making reminds me I can survive on my own and find my own happiness. I no longer mind when I'm sad or mad. All my work is made from my disappointments and sorrows, my joys and ambitions. That is where it all goes. And doesn't it make some beautiful things?